Thanks everyone for joining us today. We are going to go over the Infor CloudSuite Technical Toolbox today. You may be starting your adventure to the cloud, moving to the cloud, or you may be in the middle of it. And you may have a lot of questions about, hey, how can I get to my data? How can I interface and do things like that? So we're going to go over at a high level some of the tools that are available so that you can become familiar with it and know that you can get to your data and you can still do the things that you do today. The way we're going to do that is we're going to cover four main categories here. We're going to look at Infor OS. So you might have heard about Infor OS, and that's kind of the framework that holds the CloudSuite applications all together. So there's definitely some options and tools in there. We're going to look at the Landmark platform itself and the things that are available within that. We're going to talk specifically about some integration techniques and how we do that and how we accomplish integration in the cloud. And then we'll touch briefly on reporting and analytics, because that's always a very big question that comes up.
Okay, so the first thing that we're going to talk about under the Infor OS umbrella that Jeremy mentioned is going to be user provisioning and security. So coming off of Lawson, provisioning and assigning roles and identities and things like that, we're kind of housed in multiple different applications, different desktop applications that you could access. When you move to the cloud, Infor OS provides user management, which really is a one-stop shop for all of that. From user management, you can assign roles, create your users, assign their actor IDs, and then automatically those identities are going to get created as well. As you can see here, you can also integrate your single sign-on with that. So whatever your identity provider is in your organization, whether that's ADFS, Okta, Microsoft Azure, all of those are all compatible with CloudSuite and also easily configured right from user management within Infor OS. The other part that people are really interested in when they go to the cloud is multi-factor authentication. So multi-factor authentication is actually going to work directly with your identity provider if you're tied into an identity provider within CloudSuite. CloudSuite also offers multi-factor authentication right within Infor OS user management if your organization is using cloud identities with Ping Federate to access the applications as well.
One thing I'll just add is, a lot of clients, customers have their user provisioning already automated. And with CloudSuite, we still have the ability to do a lot of that automation and creating user accounts and auto-assigning roles and things like that. So there's a lot of options and a lot of control that you still have and you still maintain within the CloudSuite. One thing that as we start these projects and we run these projects and you look at all of the things available is these Mingle homepages. And this is something that I feel are kind of underutilized at this point because they tend to be something where it's like, hey, that's a nice to have. Let's get to the application and then we'll look at building those. But what they do really allow you to do as an organization is create a landing page or a start page when your users first log in. And these are role-based, so you can assign different pages to different groups of employees. So you may have one for your general employee population. You may have one for supervisors or hiring managers in your organization. Or you may have one for requisitioners or any of the roles within the finance world as well. These really can become tailored to the specific role. There are a lot of out-of-the-box widgets that basically show some CloudSuite information, some different high-level components and some metrics that you can utilize. And then the nice thing about these widgets that are pulling data from either FSM or GHR is they actually provide drill back capability directly into the application. So for example, a hiring manager may land on a hiring manager homepage and it shows, hey, here's the 3 requisitions that you've got open, or here's 6 new candidates that you have against those requisitions. And it gives you that high level snapshot that you can then drill back into the application directly from there.
Yep. So the next part of Infor OS that we're going to talk a little bit about is the Ion Desk. So when you move to CloudSuite, Infor OS provides you that umbrella for all of your applications, right? So we talked about user management to start, but it also allows user management to work with and seamlessly integrate with your landmark applications and your other Infor applications as well, whether that's EAM, WFM, just to name a few. So to track all of those integrations and build those out, Infor provides what's called the Ion Desk. So within the Ion Desk is where we maintain and develop all of those workflows that allow these applications to talk to each other. So in the context of security that we mentioned earlier, there's an Ion workflow that takes the security change from Mingle Infor OS and pushes that out to the application. So Landmark, GHR, based on the role assignment that was made. It's able to do this through something called logical IDs or LIDs that you'll see assigned to the roles. So each of your applications in Ion have a logical ID that allows Ion to understand where the workflow is pushing the change. So just something that you can do and maintain there through Ion. Also, within Ion, you can configure connections with the Infor Data Lake and other third-party applications that we mentioned. The Data Lake is something that allows Burst and other reporting analytics software that you can tie in to your system as well. We'll talk a little bit more about reporting and analytics, as Jeremy mentioned. And then how do we troubleshoot these workflows as things come up? Within the Ion Desk, there's an application component called OneView. OneView, you can go in and search for a specific BOD that might be erroring, or you can search within a date range, time and date range, to determine where things might have gone wrong, or just track the data flow of BODs from application to application. And then, as you can see from the screenshot here, Ion provides a nice window for you to see any errors that come up. As an administrator, this is going to be the home screen that you land on when you get into Ion. So we can very easily see how many errors we have unhandled, where the categories are, and then we can check the connection points as well to see where those errors might be coming from.
One thing too that we, as we're talking through Infor OS and the various components, we make a lot of reference to GHR or financials and supply chain, so the landmark-based applications. But Infor OS really, like I mentioned earlier, is the framework for all of your Infor applications. So whether that's expense management, mobile supply chain, or the landmark applications or other Infor products, Infor OS really kind of holds them all together. And Ion really does talk to all of them and keep everything cohesive. Next up in Infor OS is Infor Document Management. So this has become, especially in the finance application, we look at housing documents, and it's a document repository. So we're looking at primarily on the finance side, one of the biggest consumers of this is going to be your invoices, your payables invoices, but certainly purchase orders and things like that. So not only is it for creating or for storing documents coming into CloudSuite, such as payables invoices, but it also is used as a document generation tool. So creating those purchase orders and PO receipts and anything really within the application. So anything that produces outputs, even checks, for example.
Journal entries.
Journal entry, anything that you want to create a document for, so document output. Infor Document Management really becomes the repository for them. There is administrative security and all of the document types that are delivered out of the box that support the applications are all there and are automatically linked to the CloudSuite application or the specific screens. So as you're looking at a payables invoice, you've already got a direct link to that invoice image that's stored in Infor Document Management. And so all of that can be controlled by application level security. You can also create your own document types and associate them with certain business classes within the application. So very flexible and powerful utility that's included with Infor OS.
Right, and so Jeremy mentioned that Infor with the IDM is going to provide all of these document templates right for you out of the box. Your organization though has been creating these documents with third-party software or whatever it may be for some time before you're moving to CloudSuite, and you have templates that work for you, work for your vendors. They know what's coming, know what to expect. And that obviously doesn't match with what Infor is going to provide as kind of a generic template. So to combat that and allow users to make changes to their own documents and configure them in that way, Infor provides the Microsoft Word plugin that you can get directly from IDM, the administration console of IDM. You can download that, plugs right into Microsoft Word, much like Spreadsheet Designer or Microsoft add-ins would. And then it provides an interface that you can see here, right? So all of these documents use XML trees to dynamically populate values associated to the business class that the document gets generated from. So from here, you can see the left-hand window is the XML tree that provides all of the associated values that you can actually copy and paste into your document. And then once you have that document configured here with all your XML values, you can change look and feel. A lot of clients have document generation experience from previously handling these using tables, adding logos, formatting fonts, whatever it may be. Jeremy talked about checks, creating Micker lines, adding all of that information into the document. This Word plugin allows you to do all of that. Just some other features here that are actually pretty cool. Generating the test PDF is the biggest time saver from a development perspective. Otherwise, you're having to upload these you make a change, upload the document into the system, generate a test record, bring the document, print it, and then repeat altogether. With this generate test PDF, the XML that you can actually download right from CloudSuite comes with fake values for all of these XML tags. So the generate test PDF, I can make a change as a developer, generate PDF, and immediately get feedback on whether or not my change looks correct, rather than having to, like I said, go through, update everything, push it into the system, regenerate the record, and go about it that way. Content source, this is what you're looking at here. This is your content source. Again, all of the XML templates as well as the Word documents are available right out of CloudSuite. And this is all totally configurable as well. You do have the ability to add fields that are not immediately available in the delivered XML templates. So derived fields, if you're bringing in extra information to display in these documents, there are ways to customize this as well to fit your business needs.
Okay, next up is contextual applications. Contextual applications were actually introduced with Lawson version 10 when they first introduced Mingle. And these were somewhat underutilized then. Some customers enabled them and turned them on. In CloudSuite, they're there. They are part of Infor OS. And what they do is they pull information together from various different sources. So in Lawson version 10 and previous, we had drill around capability, right? So you're looking at, here I'm looking at an invoice, for example. You could drill around on that invoice to find the purchase order, the requisition, and all of those sources of that information that ultimately ended up into the purchase order. You could actually drill into it and find the check that was printed and sent to the vendor and that type of information. This particular example, this particular screenshot has the requisition to invoice payment. So it's that complete life cycle of requisition all the way out to that AP check that goes out to your vendor. And it's all right here as that record is progressing. This contextual app happens to be available all along the way in that, so if you're looking at the purchase order screen, you would see all of this same information as well. There are other contextual applications that are out of the box. This is one of the ones that customers seem to really like and enjoy because it gives that information like, hey, where's my PO, where's the requisition, where did this all come from? The other one, and I mentioned Infor document management earlier, and looking at your documents that are attached to, or your invoice that's attached specifically to a record in the database. There is another contextual app that just shows you right there that, hey, we've got a Infor document management document that's literally attached to this record. And so it gives you that immediate capability to just open up that document without even needing to go into the Infor document application.
Right, it creates that link right to IDM immediately for you using that related information context app rather than loading to the documentation tab in FSM and then having to use maybe a process flow or something like that to take the blob document and push it into IDM, which is going to be your document repository at the end of the day. So sticking with Landmark, the reveal page, this is accessible from the administration console, also a link that Infor will provide you as well. From here, you have the ability to access all of your application roles, so you can administer your Landmark applications. We talked about the administration console, or we will get to the administration console, but you can get to async. All of your administrative functions within Landmark can be accessed through the links that you can get to from the reveal page. Kind of newer functionality, we've gotten used to it and started using it quite a bit, is the Swagger API builder. There are a couple different ways to access this as well. Another way you could get to it is from the 9 key, right in your Infor OS wrapper. But from here you can get to it as well. And this is an interface where we can use business class knowledge, understanding where we want to get to, where we want to pull data, search for that business class, and then the Swagger API builder will actually allow us to point, click, select the fields that we want to bring in, the record limits, do we want to include links, our output type, LPL filters even, and actually build that API for us so we can use it with third-party software or within IPA as well to make those calls and get data directly out of CloudSuite without having to output it to a file or anything like that. And then the biggest advantage to the reveal page is really this is where you're going to get all of your extension software. So we mentioned Spreadsheet Designer, Infor Process Designer, and then Rich Client. Even if you're still using it, you can get that from the reveal page as well. So all of those links is kind of a one-stop shop to kind of get you everywhere in CloudSuite and what you might need to extend CloudSuite functionality as well.
Next up is the administration console within the application. So again, this is within the Landmark framework. We're looking at configuration parameters here, FTP setup, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Basically, there are certain things within CloudSuite that are configurable, some options that you can turn on and turn off depending on how your organization wants to process and do business. So a lot of flexibility here. There's a lot of documentation on those various configuration parameters. Sometimes things you might open a support ticket for because you're troubleshooting an issue with Infor, and they'll tell you to turn on or enable a certain configuration parameter. So the administration console is where that is done. This is also where we're going to set up our analytical cubes. So we'll talk about that briefly when we get to reporting, but there are some administration pieces here that manage that. The Rich Client installation, there's some things there. Rich Client is going away. I forget the actual decommission date of that. It's already decommissioned for end users. It's still available from an administrative perspective. And then exception log handling. So you may be troubleshooting some issues, and if you look at the async job that comes out of Landmark, there is sometimes an exception ID, and you can come to that exception log inquiry screen here within the administration console, and you can actually get a little bit more detail. Some other things that are here are some database utilities like database export, database import for loading data into some import business classes or conversion business classes. We also have replication sets and some other things in exporting configurations from one environment to another. So really an administrative utility screen that it allows your system admins essentially to kind of manage things that are coming in and out of CloudSuite.
All right, the next is Async Administrator. So Async is really going to be your processing engine for most of all your actions that actually come through CloudSuite. Key thing to note about Async is that it is shared amongst both FSM and GHR. So why is that important? So in CloudSuite, Infor is actually going to set the max number of actions that you are allowed to take at any one time in your system across both of those applications. They determine that number by licensing, but from the async role, you can see what that max number of actions is. Again, smaller clients, it's going to be less. Larger clients, it'll be higher to handle the actions and the processing that your organization is going to be doing. From here, though, we can see different views right across the top. You can see on the screenshot. The big one is going to be the queue view to start, which is displayed here. The queue view allows you to see what's running in a queue, what's failed in a queue. You can also see the max number of actions and the queue priority. So this is fully configurable. We tend to leave it as is, right? Infor does a pretty good job allocating things out of the box for us. But there are scenarios in which you might want to, up the max number of actions on a queue, create your own queue, create a new queue mapping, whatever it may be. An example that we use all the time is maybe month end for financial users. There's a report document queue. At month end, a lot of finance users are running a lot of reports. They want to, make a change and see a change immediately. So this report document queue can get pretty, bogged down, right? So that's a situation where you might want to up the number of actions that we're allocating to that queue. That way, documents are moving through and we can, get on with month end in that sense. The other thing you can do is configure async exception handling. So how do we do this, right? Within the queue, we can attach emails, email addresses, and notification settings to actions that go through that queue. So if I attach my email to it, I can have it notify me always. So even if actions process normally, I can get notification just, hey, this went off without a hitch. Or I can have it notify me on failure, right? So it's a tool for an administrator to say, hey, something went through XYZ queue, it failed, take a look at it, troubleshoot it. Jeremy mentioned the exception log that we can go through for the admin console. We can also just re-queue the action, honestly, is most of the time what'll help us clear that error and keep it moving. Other times we're gonna have to dig into the log and go through the action, work with whatever end user took that action and see what they were trying to accomplish before we are able to work that exception.
Okay, next up, we're going to actually start kind of gearing a little bit more towards the development side of things now. So we had looked at a lot of system admin type content. Now we're going to kind of dive into a little bit of that. First up and probably foremost in the landmark environment is Configuration Console. So if you're already on your CloudSuite, you should be very familiar with Configuration Console. If you're not, this is the tool that allows you to modify lists, screens, forms, where you're adding user fields, that type of information. I do see here that my screenshot is from Rich Client, so it's old, but the Configuration Console is now available all web-based, and I know that I personally have switched to 100% to using it all on web-based. I think I did do a webinar last year on the web-based UI for Configuration Console. So if you're curious about that, I'd encourage you to check that out as well.
So these are the extensions we talked a little bit about through the reveal page, but just going more in depth here. Infor Process Designer, if you're moving from strictly an LSF instance to multi-tenant, Infor Process Designer is the workflow engine that allows us to build in process flows. It's also an integration engine, right, that we use to move files, make those API calls that we talked about, to third-party applications, or even bring data in to CloudSuite. Screenshot here of IPA, you can see all the different nodes and honestly how complicated some of these can be. Some of these decision structures, based on input from the user, we can configure user actions, right? So, throughout a workflow, typically with approvals, right? We get to a step, we need a user to approve, an invoice or, reject, reassign that invoice even. All actions that are allowable to us through IPA. The second one here is Spreadsheet Designer. So anyone that's familiar with using MS add-ins, this is kind of like the new and improved version in CloudSuite. Works the same way as an Excel add-in, but from there, it actually allows you to update in batch records in CloudSuite, but it doesn't necessarily just need to be an update, right? In MS add-ins, we're used to add, change, delete. In CloudSuite, Spreadsheet Designer actually allows you to take any action that's available to you on that business class. So in CloudSuite, it's more workflow oriented. It's not as simple as add, change, delete anymore. Sometimes it is, but there are a lot of different actions you can take that update records, create new records, whatever the case may be. Any of those actions, though, available to you in Spreadsheet Designer, so pretty cool there. And then probably the most exciting one for CloudSuite users, especially, we talked about different ways to get at your data now that you don't have access directly to that database. Infor provides the Ion API gateway. So this allows you, we talked about a little bit with the Swagger API builder, ways to query out data in real time that normally you might run just a database query for your Lawson instance. Obviously, we don't have that capability anymore with CloudSuite. So the Ion API gateway allows us to make those REST API calls to get data out of our system in real time, rather, like I said, than running a direct database query.
And if you're not using APIs, which a lot of our interfaces as we're moving from from Lawson version 10, we're used to doing flat file interfacing. So at the core, because we don't have server access anymore, at the core of that becomes the SFTP site. An SFTP site is provisioned with every CloudSuite environment, and customers, I think most customers use the one that's provisioned by Infor. Some customers, you do have the ability to set up your own FTP site. So if you already have an FTP site in your organization, you may want to utilize that, especially if you've got folder structures set up with multiple users allowed to drop or pick up files. That becomes a valuable tool. The FTP site that's provisioned by Infor, you get one user account that's created that has access to the full site. So some customers like to use their own so they can secure it and lock it down a little bit more. Like I said, that FTP site really becomes kind of the central point between the Infor cloud and maybe your local data center where you're exchanging information between your Infor applications in the cloud and on-premise applications. Or it could also be third-party applications that are in a different cloud. So cloud to cloud and utilizing an FTP site. So those are some of the options. So that SFTP site really becomes core to your integration.
Right, and so outbound integrations here, we just have a workflow, what an outbound integration looks like, right? So we talked about we're starting with our CloudSuite application, obviously our systems of record. From there, we, whatever the integration tool is, right? Typically going to be IPA most of the time, but again, other ways to get that data out. So from the integration tool, we can go to the FTP site, like Jeremy mentioned, right? Drop a flat file for a bank or a benefits vendor or whatever it may be to go out there and get, or we can push to their FTP site, right? It doesn't have to just be the Infor provisioned FTP site that we're adding data to. The other option, obviously, is the API calls, right? And that's becoming more and more used as we get more used to it. Again, because it allows us to be more real time rather than push, wait, grab it, process it in that sense. And then from there, obviously, the local client's going to process it. And then now our third-party application is updated with our data from our CloudSuite application.
On the flip side of that, of course, we have the inbound interfaces that are coming in. And again, these could be coming in from a third-party application that you've got in your on-premise data center. It could also be another third-party application that's in the cloud. Typically, we will set up for file interfaces, we will set up the file automation or the process automation file channels to just sit and monitor and look for those files and automatically kick off a process flow to load those files or do something with those files once they get to the cloud. We mentioned the API gateway, starting to see this utilized a lot more now, and this allows real-time integration. So it's more of a transactional, one at a time, real-time transactional based integration. Certainly have seen that, and the API gateway does allow you to actually set up your third-party vendors or applications to write directly back into CloudSuite. And that sounds scary, but it is fully controllable by security You can create users that have just dedicated roles that allow those interfaces to write specifically to a business class or even down to the field level. So there's a lot of control, and that definitely is something that's being more utilized, and it's more for a real-time integration type update.
So we talked about the extensions and the interfacing tools. Infor process automation, again, IPA is going to be probably the most widely utilized of those tools to accomplish these things. And just a little bit about that, right? So it's a drag and drop development tool, right? Infor provides nodes that you can see here. These are all called nodes that allow different things to occur, right? We can make decisions from here. We can query the system, right? Through what's called a landmark transaction. Also, what we're starting to use are the landmark admin nodes to run DB export and DB import. Some utilities that are available to us from the admin console, typically, that Jeremy talked about earlier. Infor process automation is going to reside at the core of everything, right? So what does that mean? In the system, the user is typically going to take actions, right? Everything's an action. We talked about how async processes different actions. But those actions can also kick off workflows, right? And the workflow engine really is Infor process automation. So through service definitions that we set up within Process Server, we can create our own actions to kick off workflows that are completely custom. And again, there are a ton that are delivered right in the application. Just like anything else that Infor provides, all of these delivered flows can be modified, right? So you'll see a lot of standard names, right? Typically what we'll do, these get us 80, 90% of the way there most of the time, but obviously that last 10% is what really drives value for clients. So we can take the delivered flows as a starting point and then add to it as needed. That way we can accomplish business needs. From there, we just give it a new name, right? That way we don't confuse it or overwrite the delivered flow. And then we adjust service definitions or whatever that may else be needed so that flow gets utilized by that client when it's supposed to.
Replication sets is something new to CloudSuite. So for customers coming from version 10, this is new functionality. It is pretty powerful, and we are seeing this utilized a lot. It does allow you to take a business class or a set of business classes and create a replication of that data. The nice thing about replication sets is they can be used to generate a full file or a changes only file since the last time that replication set ran. So if you've got an interface that you need to say, hey, here's the records that changed in the past week or the past day, we can set that up. And again, this is something that we're seeing utilized more frequently. You can also report off of audit log data utilizing replication sets, and I've certainly built interfaces that require some of that history or even future dated entries in your system to be replicated to push down to other systems.
Something that's newer and, as you see here, available in the HCM application only is going to be the file creation utility. This has actually been a huge improvement on creating files to be sent out to vendors, to be integrated with payroll systems, right? So what it allows us to do is quickly create these files. We say employee-based here, but it could really be any business class. It allows us to really just point and click and pick our fields, pick the relationships to different business classes, and really cuts down on development time for any files that we're trying to create out of the HCM application. The biggest one that I can think of is benefits files, right? Benefits files are always a huge headache. Going back and forth, testing with the vendor. The development time is, between 40, 80 hours, typically, something like that. We can go through with this point and click utility, create all the relationships that we need right in the application and cut that in half, maybe more. So it's incredibly helpful that way. The other big utilization for the file creation utility is interfacing all of your information from your HCR or HCM application into your payroll application if you're still running S3 payroll. So if you have a hybrid setup, this is now Infor's recommended way to interface your deduction exports, your employee exports, job position, all that stuff is now delivered with the file creation utility. The creation utility will create those files for you, push them out. There's a delivered IPA process that comes with it too, actually. The one for employees is encrypted to protect sensitive data. Everything else goes through a non-encrypted process, output to the FTP server, where your S3 or your single tenant landmark instance can bring that information in, process it, kind of like we described with the outbound integration process earlier.
And of course, we mentioned the ION API gateway more for real-time integrations, not necessarily for the large batch transaction interfacing processing that we're used to today, or in your Lawson version 10 environment. And like I said, this is directly from Infor, cloud to cloud, so I've kind of seen it all. But it is, again, it's a powerful utility that you can easily build those API integrations between your Infor cloud and third-party application.
All right, so shifting gears a little bit to reporting and analytics. What you see here is different ways that Infor allows you to report on your data, right? So, in LSF, typically the big one is Crystal Reports, right? And Crystal Reports is, inherently based on having a database connection, right? We talked about how we don't have that database connection in CloudSuite because we're sharing that in theory with other clients. So what does Infor do for us to get reporting and analytics accomplished? The biggest one and the most useful that I've found is going to be this first one here, the interactive list views. So CloudSuite, out of the box, across every module, every screen, has list views that are dynamically filterable. Just provide that data right in front of you, right as you're moving through the application. The other cool thing about these list views is that they're able to be personalized. So what does personalization mean? Well, Jeremy talked a little bit about configuration console, but you also have the ability to personalize things to extend data for just a specific user, right? So if I'm a user looking at an invoice list and I say I need to see another field from maybe a related business class, I can go ahead and personalize that list so just I have that piece of data, right? It's not going to show up for everybody. I'm not changing screens across the entire application, just so I can see what I need to see to make my job a little bit easier that way. The other thing you can do with personalized list views and things like that is you can go ahead and create reports directly from them. So same way you would go through and try to personalize a report, you can go ahead and create, and now this list view that you've personalized to meet your need is always going to show up for you in the My Reports section of CloudSuite. So cool there. Infor also provides application reports, right? So these are going to be different actions that you can take throughout the system that generate a report that you're trying to see. So you can schedule these, you can adjust them, you can adjust parameters, you can create your own actions to generate reports as well through configuration console. And then moving forward, embedded industry analytics, so different things that you can see through maybe the DEPM application, BI, FSM, even within Burst. And we definitely have more to come on those throughout the webinar week.
The question always comes up when you talk about reporting. Well, how do I know which reporting tool to use? And so we've got a kind of a rough guideline here that we utilize for when we need to pick the right tool. Some of the key factors are whether it's real time or it can be delayed by a day. We've talked about Burst, we've talked about BIFSM. The BIFSM uses the cubes that are in the landmark application. Those are near real time. And then of course we talked about Burst, we just mentioned Burst briefly, but Burst is really going to be more of a, hey, this is okay if it's a day, maybe old. A lot of times when we set up Burst, it's those replication sets that are utilized. Actually, there's pre-built replication sets out of the box to support the out-of-the-box Burst data model. Typically, that's recommended to run them once a day, so in the evening, off hours, because sometimes, depending on your volume of transactions, it can take a little bit longer to process. So again, just high-level overview of when to pick the right tool for the right job. Okay, And that sums up our content for today. We'll take questions. I just want to highlight here our Infor HCM Road Mapping Festival that we've got coming up. So if you're beginning your journey to HCM, CloudSuite HCM, or looking or in process or already live but want to look at some of the additional functionality, this is a great opportunity to come collaborate, learn more, and have some hands-on training and some road mapping sessions as well. And then, of course, we've got boot camp coming up, our CloudSuite boot camp coming up in Tampa, Florida, the end of January. So when better to go to Florida than in January. So basically, it's a high-level overview. It's a hands-on experience, and we go into a lot of detail of some of the stuff that we've covered today.